Welcome to our Bookaccino live event for November. This is the last Bookaccino live event we'll be doing this year. The few books come out in December, so as a result, this will be November through the end of the year, and lots of sneak peeks into what's going to be happening in January. So get ready to take notes. Anybody who did not receive the leave behind that was sent before 1 o'clock today, it is in the chat. So there's a link in the chat to where it is on the website, but everybody should have received it before 1 o'clock today. I sent it out to everyone. So let's get started. First of all, this is always one of our fun features. It's your top picks from October's presentation. Number one was The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern. Second was Sophie Kinsella's What Does It Feel Like, which is a book reporter bets on selection. Next is The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins, another bets on selection. Next is The Secret War of Julia Child. I am dying to read this book just from the description from the last time. Then we've got The Mistletoe Mystery, another bets on selection. Louise Penny's The Grey Wolf, the latest in her series, and also very able to be read as a standalone. And Like Mother, like by Susan Reiger, and that is also a bets on selection. And the others don't think they're not good. It's just that I have not had time to read everything at this point. So I'm spotlighting some books that I think were bets on as I was reading them. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about some fiction, upcoming fiction. First, we're starting out with Lazarus Man by Richard Price. It's on sale this week. East Harlem, 2008. In an instant, a fiery five-story tenement collapses to a fuming hill of rubble, pancaking the cars parked in front and coating the street with a thick layer of ash. As the city's rescue services and media outlets respond, the surrounding neighborhood descends into chaos. At day's end, 6 bodies are recovered, but many of the other tenants are missing. In Lazarus Man, Richard Price, one of the greatest chroniclers of life in urban America, creates intertwining portraits of a group of compelling and singular characters whose lives are permanently impacted by the disaster. So there you've got Lazarus Man. He's the author also of Lush Life, if you're looking for books you might have read by him before. Next, we've got Pictures of You by Emma Gray, which is also out this week, and it's out in both hardcover and paperback original. Evie Hudson should be grieving her dead husband, but since the car crash that claimed his life and landed her in the hospital, she can't remember him at all. The only person who can help her piece her past together is her high school best friend, Drew Kennedy. When snippets of her memory start falling into place, Evie wonders exactly how she ended up in a life she couldn't be further from the one she dreamed of. This time around, she's seeing all the things she's missed and the life she gets to choose again. So we've got Pictures of You. Next, we've got Rolling Towards Clear Skies by Catherine Ryan Hyde, and it is also out this week. Maggie Blount, a divorced mother of 2 in a California position, puts her private practice on hold when disaster strikes. Doctors on Wheels takes her and Alex, Maggie's professional and romantic partner, wherever they're needed. After rolling into rural Louisiana in the wake of a Category 5 hurricane, Maggie immediately bonds with 2 sisters and their puppy, all orphaned by the storm. Feeling blessed and looking forward to their new foster home in affluent Vista Del Mar, a world apart from the one they've known, Jean and Rose are polite, appreciative, and humble. Frankly, they're the polar opposite of Maggie's own self-involved teenage daughters, Willa and Gemma, who resist this intrusion by strangers into their privileged lives. And soon enough, Maggie's new blended family is in chaos. So there you've got Rolling Towards Clear Skies. Next, we've got The City and Its Uncertain Walls by Haruki Murakami. This book is on sale on November 19th. We begin with a nameless young couple, a boy and a girl, teenagers in love. One day she disappears, and her absence haunts him for the rest of his life. Thus begins a search for this lost love that takes a man into middle age and on a journey between the real world and another world. Where unicorns roam, a gatekeeper determines who can enter and who must remain behind, and shadows become untethered from their selves. The man leaves his life in Tokyo behind and ventures to a small mountain town where he becomes the head librarian, only to learn the mysterious circumstances surrounding the gentleman who had the job before him. As the seasons pass and the man grows more uncertain about the porous boundaries between these two worlds, he meets a strange young boy who helps him to see what he's been missing all along. So there's the city and its uncertain walls. Next, I know we did a number of Christmas books in the last presentation that we gave, but we're going to do a few more this time just because they're coming out end of November. Here we've got this coming out on November 26th. It's Christmas in Bethel from Richard Paul Evans. After growing up in an unstable home, escaping an abusive marriage, and witnessing daily tragedies as an EMT, Lee Beth Stilton just can't bring herself to care about Christmas cheer. In fact, she's so convinced she's not worth loving that one winter's eve she decides she can't go on until she comes across a book called Bethel. Lee's unfamiliar with the author J.D. Harper, but his words speak directly to her. She avidly reads every novel Harper has written, and when he comes to town for a book signing, she jumps at the opportunity to meet him. In a twist of fate, Lee runs into J.D. in a coffee shop, and the two immediately click. But she's leery after a lifetime of pain, and when she discovers that J.D. hasn't been completely honest, her hopes are dashed. Can they find their way back to each other, and can Lee learn to trust her heart? So there's Christmas in Bethel. Next, we've got Bluebird Day by Megan Tatey, which is coming out on December 3rd. Alpine skiing greatest of all time, Claudine Potts and her daughter Wiley have been bred for gold medal glory. They're skiing their way to fame, but this gilded future is cut short when a fall forces Claudine's retirement and Wiley's debilitating anxiety sends her off the slopes. With the collapse of their ski careers, the relationship falters, and now it's been years since Wiley and Claudine have even spoken. They live on opposite coasts, pursuing different passions, until a chance opportunity to pair up in a European fitness competition drives them back together. Can this duo survive snow-buried regrets and family secrets and have the happy union that they're hoping for? There we've got Bluebird Day. And Bluebird Day is the day, because I love to ski, that refers then when you're going to go out and the sky is completely blue and there are no crowds. That's a Bluebird Day. I love those. Next, we've got Private Rights by Julia Armfeld. And this is going to be on, I'm sorry, Julia Armfield. It's out on December 3rd. It's been raining for a long time now. So long that the land has reshaped itself, and old rituals and religions are creeping back into practice. Sisters Isla, Irene, and Agnes have not spoken in some time when their father, an architect as cruel as he was revered, dies. His death offers an opportunity for the sisters to come together in a new way. In the grand glass house they grew up in, their father's most famous creation, the sisters sort through the secrets and memories he left behind until their fragile bond is shattered by a revelation in his will. Sisters are more strange than ever, and their lives spin out of control. But something even more sinister might be unfolding, something related to their mother's long ago disappearance and the strangers who have always seemed unusually interested in the sisters' lives. So there you've got Private Rights. Next, we've got Rental House from Wang, and I am dying to read this book. I've got the galley on my shelf. It's coming out December 3rd. Here's the premise. Kuru and Nate are college sweethearts who marry despite their family differences. Kuru's strict Chinese immigrant parents demand perfection, while Nate's rural, white, uh, working class family distrusts his intellectual ambitions and his foreign wife. Some years into the marriage, the couple invites their families on vacation. See where this is going, folks. At a Cape Cod beach house and later at a luxury Catskills bungalow, Kiru, Nate, and their giant sheepdog navigate visits from in-laws and unexpected guests, all wondering if they have what it takes to answer big questions. How do you cope when your spouse and your family of origin clash? How many people and dogs make a family? And when the pack starts to disintegrate, what can you do to shepherd everyone back together? Going into the holidays, I know many people are going to have many different family members at their homes. This is the book to read to practice in advance. He's the author of Chemistry, and you got to like the way the chair is on fire in the picture on the cover. Do some historical fiction. We're going to start out with Christmas with the Queen, which is on sale on November 19th. While the young Queen Elizabeth II finds her feet as the new monarch, she also must face the right words to continue the tradition of her late father's Christmas Day radio broadcast. As preparations begin for the royal Christmas at Sandringham House in Norfolk, old friends Jack Devereaux and Olive Carter are unexpectedly reunited by the occasion. Olive, a single mother and aspiring reporter at the BBC, leaps at the opportunity to cover the holiday celebration. Jack, a recently widowed chef, reluctantly takes up a new role in the royal kitchens of Sandringham, and a chance encounter with an old friend helps to reignite the spark of his passion and ambition. As Jack and Olive's paths continue to cross over the following 5 Christmases, they grow ever closer. Yet Olive carries the burden of a heavy secret that threatens to destroy everything. You always notice, folks, there's something to destroy everything. We just don't know what it is yet. And I guess that's the premise of the book. And I think I failed to mention this is by Hazel Gay and Heather Webb, and they're the best-selling authors of Last Christmas in Paris. So there you've got the premise of what else can happen on Christmas holidays. Next, we've got Name of the Child by Niall Williams, which is coming on November 19th. Dr. Jack Troy was born and raised in Faha, but his responsibilities for the sick and his care for the dying mean that he's always been set apart from town. His eldest daughter, Ronnie, has grown up in her father's shadow and remains there, having missed one chance at love and passed up another offer of marriage from an unsuitable man. But in the Advent season of 1962, as the town readies itself for Christmas, Ronnie and Dr. Troy's lives are turned upside down when a baby is left in their care. As winter passes, father and daughter's lives, the understanding of their family and their role in the community are changed forever. So he was previously the author of This Is Happiness, and Ann Patchett says, I am such a fan of Niall Williams. So there you go. Next, we've got The Greatest Lie of All from Gillian Cantor, which is coming on December 3rd. Fledgling actress Amelia Grant is at rock bottom when offered the opportunity of a lifetime to star in a biopic about the world-renowned romance author Gloria Diamond, who used her own tragic love story as inspiration for her best-selling books. To prepare for the role, she'll spend a week with Gloria at her secluded Washington estate. It's a chance to get out of LA, away from her cheating ex-boyfriend, and to make her recently deceased mother proud. However, Amelia's excitement is short-lived once she actually meets Gloria, who is cold, verging on the rude, and mostly unavailable. If not for Gloria's frustratingly handsome son, Will, the visit might be a complete waste of her time. But when Amelia stumbles upon a secret from Gloria's past, she realizes Gloria's life story is more fiction than fact. And as the movie's filming date grows near, Amelia must decide how much she's willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth. See, next. Now we've got some thrillers and mysteries. Starting out with April Storm by Lila Meacham. And many of you may remember her as the author of Roses. Lila sadly has passed away, so this is her last book. But she was a really acclaimed author. She came onto the scene writing very old, like when she was in middle age, and she just loved every single thing about being an author. So what's this one about? Catherine Walker enjoys an enviable life. Her husband is an accomplished doctor. Her children are bright and successful, and she devotes herself to charity work that uplifts her suburban Colorado community. Settling into a new year, her life couldn't be better until April. For Catherine, April has always rained trouble, but this time may be even stormier than the fraught past she's tried to overcome. Already distraught over the child she miscarried in this same cursed month many years ago, the emotionally fragile woman isn't ready to consider the overwhelming evidence that someone may be trying to take her husband and her life. So there we've got April Storm. Beautiful cover. David Baldacci, we've got To Die For. It's out this week. Travis Devine has become a pro at accomplishing any mission he's given, but this time it's not his skills that sent him to Seattle to aid the FBI and escorting orphaned 12-year-old Betsy Odom to a meeting with her uncle, who's under investigation for RICO charges. Instead, he's hoping to lay low, keep off the radar of the any enemy, the girl on the train. But Divine gets to know Betsy. Questions begin to arise about the death of her parents. Divine digs for answers, and what he finds points to a conspiracy bigger than he ever could have imagined. Might finally be time for Divine and the girl on the train to come face to face. Divine is going to figure out the differences between his friends and his enemies, and in some cases, they might well be both. So there we've got To Die For. Next, we've got Shell Games by Bonnie Kistler. I read this a couple of weeks ago. It's coming on November 19th. Julie's mother, Kate, is a self-made real estate developer, a grand dame in Florida society, a power broker in Florida politics. It wasn't easy for Julie to grow up in the shadow of such a dynamo, but she loves her mother. She and her husband, Eric, are thrilled when Kate marries her long-lost high school sweetheart, a salt-of-the-earth man named Charlie. But on their wedding night, Kate calls the police in hysterics to report that Charlie just confessed to a notorious unsolved crime from decades before. Charlie says that Kate imagined it. Eric says Kate has dementia. And the FBI says Charlie couldn't possibly have committed that crime. Julie doesn't know what to believe. Is her brilliant mother losing her mind? Or is sweet, lovable Charlie gaslighting Kate to gain control of her fortune? As Julie tries to navigate through this maze of paranoia and mind games, cracks start to develop in her own marriage as it seems that Eric, her husband, is keeping secrets as well. So there's a lot going on in this book. Who says confession is good for the soul? It's a good, wine from it. And it's really interesting that you find out something at the beginning and what you find out at the end that just goes, whoa, there's your aha moment. So fun reading, really good reading from Bonnie. Next, we've got Against the Grain from Peter Lovesey, which is coming on December 3rd. Against the Grain is the conclusion to the Peter Diamond series and Peter Lovesey's final book. Detective Peter Diamond is taking a short holiday. His former colleague, Julie Hargraves, has invited Diamond and his party Paloma to visit the idyllic village of Baskerville, I'm sorry. The woman who owns the village's largest dairy farm has been convicted of manslaughter following a terrible accident in her grain silo. Julie's ex-investigator instinct tells her there's been a miscarriage of justice and a murder is on the loose. But Julie's been keeping secrets of her own and can't take her inquiry any further. Diamond takes the bait. The case is a fascinating one, but maintaining his innocent tourist facade becomes harder as he closes in on one of his suspects. So there you go, the conclusion of the Peter Diamond series. So anybody who hasn't read it, happy to go back and read the whole thing, knowing there's a conclusion now. Next, we've got Alter Ego from Alex Segura coming on December 3rd. This has been getting a lot of buzz. Annie Bustamante is a cultural force like none other, an acclaimed filmmaker, an author, a comic book artist known for one of the all-time best superhero comics in recent memory. But she's never been able to tackle her longtime favorite superhero, the Lethal Lynx. Only known to the most diehard comics fans and long out of print, the rights were never available until now. But Annie's skeptical of who's making the author. Burt Kaila's father started Triumph Comics and has long claimed ownership of the Lynx. She starts getting anonymous messages urging her not to trust anyone. Annie's inner alarms go off. Even worse, Carlyle wants to pair her with a disgraced filmmaker for a desperate media play. There you go. There's Alter Ego. And, as you're listening to the books that we're talking about today, think holiday giving, think presents. Who would like these books besides you? I mean, To Me From Me is my favorite gift, I have to say, because then I always get exactly what I wanted, and I get exactly when I want it as well. But giving gifts is also a fabulous thing to be thinking about this time of year. Next, we've got Locked In by Jussi Adler Olsen. It's the 10th and final installment of the Department Q series. On the day after Christmas, Detective Carl Mork, head of Department Q, finds himself handcuffed in a police car headed for Copenhagen's Vestry prison. After 15 years, a violent case from his past has caught up with him. Charges of drug trafficking and murder threaten to destroy his life and career, but he's being framed. Someone has $1 million bounty on his head to make sure he doesn't talk, putting him in grave danger among the prison's incarcerated criminals and corrupt officers. The question remains, why? Carl's colleagues at the Copenhagen Police Department instantly turn their backs on him, leaving the ever-loyal Department Q team as his only hope. In search of answers, Rose, Assad, and Gordon must disobey direct orders from way up the chain to try to unravel the case. Then we've got some memoirs, biographies, and other nonfiction, which is big this time of year. Start out with Didion and Babbitts by Lily Anowick. This book is getting a lot of buzz this week. There was a big piece on it in Vulture that I'll try to link to in the Friday Book Reporter newsletter. Eve Babbitts died on December 17th, 2021. Found in the rack, ruin, and filth of her apartment was a stack of boxes packed by her mother decades before. Inside was a lost world that centered on a two-story rental in a down-at-the-heel section of Hollywood, 7406 Franklin Avenue, a combination salon, hotbed, living end where writers and artists mix with movie stars, rock and rollers, and drug trash. 7406 Franklin Avenue was the making of one great American writer, Joan Didion. It was also the breaking and then remaking, and thus the true making, of another great American writer, Eve Babbitts. Didion and Babbitts formed a complicated alliance, a friendship that went bad, amity turned to enmity. Didion, in spite of her confessional style, is so little known or understood. She remains opaque and elusive until now. She's also the author of Hollywood's Eve. So there you've got Didion and Babbitts. I've got that on my shelf to read as well. Next, we've got Too Young for Cancer, One Woman's Battle for a Diagnosis and a Fighting Chance. This is by Katie Coleman. It's out this week. New Year's Eve 2020 was supposed to be a turning point to better days for 29-year-old Katie Coleman. Instead, she found herself in the ER processing the earth-shattering news of stage 4 cancer diagnosis, one that had come after years of being assured she was too young for cancer, and a repeated misdiagnosis of anxiety. Too Young for Cancer tells the story of Katie's journey from diagnosis with an ultra-rare cancer through treatment, recovery, and a life-altering shift in perspective. Katie started her journey shy, timid, and frightened of an intimidating medical world. But as she learns to advocate for herself, she faces her own mortality with bravery and finds herself at top cancer institutions arguing her case for a radical and high-risk surgery that could change her life forever. And I think we're pulling this book because we're hearing of a lot of people who are young, who are coming down or have cancer. And as a result, we want to get a book out there that if you find somebody that you know that is in that situation, you've got something to point them to read. That's a story about somebody who's fighting for themselves, which is really what you need to do. Next, we've got Vanishing Treasures by Catherine Rundell. It's a bestiary of extraordinary endangered creatures. It's out this week. The world is more astonishing, more miraculous, and more wonderful than our wildest imaginings. In Vanishing Treasures, Catherine Rundell takes us on a globe-spanning tour of the world's most awe-inspiring animals currently facing extinction. This urgent, inspiring book of essays dedicated to 23 unusual and underappreciated creatures is a clarion call insisting that we all look at the world around us with new eyes, to see the magic of the animals we live among, their unknown histories and capabilities, and above all, how lucky we are to tread the same ground as such vanishing creatures. And I'm trying to figure out what creatures on the cover, and I don't know. Bill Bryson has called this a rare and magical book. Next, we've got Cher, the memoir, part one. Love, it's part one. It's coming on November 19th. After more than 70 years of fighting to live her life on her own terms, Cher finally reveals her true story in intimate detail in a two-part memoir. The next part will be out next November, in case you're wondering. As a dyslexic child who dreamed of becoming famous, Cher was raised in often chaotic circumstances, surrounded by singers, actors, and a mother who inspired her in spite of their difficult relationship. With her trademark honesty and humor, Cher traces how this diamond in the rough succeeded with no plan and little confidence become a trailblazing superstar the world has been unable to ignore for more than half a century. It follows her extraordinary beginnings through childhood to meeting and marrying Sonny Bono and reveals the highly complicated relationship that made them world famous but eventually drove them apart. So that's where we're going to end. And you know there's a lot more Cher story for next year. So there you've got part one. Got Citizen, My Life After the White House by Bill Clinton. It's coming November 19th. On January 20th, 2001, after nearly 30 years in politics, 8 of them as President of the United States, Bill Clinton was suddenly a private citizen. He was only 54 years old and he wanted to make meaningful use of his skills, his relationships with world leaders, and all that he learned in a lifetime of politics. Just days after leaving the White House, not the Lighthouse, the White House, the call came to aid victims of a devastating earthquake in India, and he hit the ground running. For the next 2 decades, he would create an enduring legacy of public service and advocacy work from Indonesia to Louisiana, Northern Ireland to South Africa, and in the process, reimagine philanthropy, philanthropy, and redefine the impact a former president could have on the world. It's his front row, first person chronicle of his post presidential years and the most significant events of the 21st century. Next, we've got Raised by a Serial Killer by April Blasio. I am looking forward to reading this book. I really like books about serial killers. I will be perfectly honest. I am kind of obsessed with these kind of stories. What made these people this way, what they did, it drives me every single time. So here we go. Coming December 3rd. One evening in 2009, April Blasio was searching online, as she had been every night, for unsolved murders in the towns her family had lived in growing up. And she stumbled across the latest investigations into the Sweetheart murders cold case. All at once, the buried memories of her father's dark history were awakened, and she knew she had to take action. She picked up the phone to call a detective, and the rest is now an infamous true crime story. In Raised by a Serial Killer, she bravely reveals an astonishing tale of a lifetime of manipulation, unexplained upheavals, and silent fear. Some of part of her had always known what her father was capable of, but the full truth of how she came to these revelations is as riveting as it is quietly terrifying. And you look at that picture and you realize it's like your everyday guy, and then you see what happens. I think it's going to be fascinating. Next, we've got January titles to look forward to. Yes, yes, yes. We're getting you to next year, folks. It's time for you to start writing down what you are ready to read, either pre-ordered or on the list at the library. And we're going to start with a book that's getting a lot of buzz. They've gotten this book to me, the galley, and they're dying for me to read it. I have just decided I just need to take a week and just read because everybody's saying, "Did you read it? Did you read it?" about so many books. This is The Note by Alifair Burke. Ashley Elston, the New York Times, #1 New York Times bestselling author, First Lie Wins, said, "I absolutely love The Note. Trust no one in this irresistible page turner." And Alifair is the best-selling author of The Wife. So growing up, May Hanover was always a good girl. Raised by first-generation Chinese single mother with high expectations, she didn't have room to slip up, let alone fail. But even good girls have secrets and regrets. And when it comes to her friendships with Lauren and Kelsey, she's had her fair share of both. Their bond, forged when May was just 12 years old, has withstood a tragic accident, individual scandals, heartbreak, and loss. Now the three friends have reunited for the first time in years for a few days of sun and fun in the Hamptons. But a chance encounter with a pair of strangers leads to a drunken prank that goes horribly awry. She finds herself at the center of an urgent police investigation. May begins to wonder if Lauren and Kelsey are keeping secrets from her, testing the limits of her loyalty to lifelong friends. Sounds amazing. Dying to read it. Next, we know how many of you love Fiona Davis. Many, many, many of her books have been read by you. This is The Stolen Queen, also coming on January 7th. A couple of timelines here. We start in Egypt. In 1936, anthropology student Charlotte Cross is offered and accepts a coveted spot on an archaeological dig in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. And then an unbearable tragedy strikes. New York City in 1978, 19-year-old Annie Jenkins lands an opportunity to work for the former Vogue fashion editor Diana Vreeland, who's in the midst of organizing the Met Gala. Meanwhile, Charlotte is now leading a quiet life as the associate curator of Met's celebrated Department of Egyptian Art. She's consumed by her research, and wait a second, she's consumed by her research on Hathor, a rare female pharaoh dismissed by most other Egyptologists as unimportant. The night of the gala, one of the Egyptian art collection's most valuable artifacts goes missing, and there are signs that the curse might be awakening. Annie and Charlotte team up to search for the missing antiquity. And this had its roots in something that happened at the Gala Ball years ago. And it happened with one of the Kardashians. And it's out there, the story's out there. Go do some looking around. So there you go. The Stolen Queen, Fiona Davis. You know she does her research, and you know she's going to make you see the Met in a whole different way. I can see many people flocking to go back to the museum just because of the way she writes, and she puts you right into the story. The fashion collection there is incredible. Besides going to the Egyptian art area, if you're in a book club, you know you're going to want to travel and go see this as well. Also, in our last couple of newsletters, we've been mentioning that they're putting together a trip. There's a travel agent putting together a trip to meet authors and also to tour the areas that they talk about in their books. And her first author that she's working with is Fiona, and where she's going to take you around the city. So you may have caught this in a couple of the last newsletters that we've sent out. Next, from Alice Feeney, we've got Beautiful Ugly. Here, this is supposed to be great. It's coming on January 14th. Author Grady Green is having the worst, best day of his life. Grady calls his wife to share some exciting news as she's driving home. Here's Abby slam on the brakes, get out of the car, and then nothing. When he eventually finds her car by the cliff edge, the headlights are on, the door is open, phone is still there, his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady's still overcome with grief and desperate to know what happened to Abby. He can't sleep, can't write, so he travels to a tiny Scottish island to try to get his life back on track. And then he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. So there you go, Beautiful Ugly. Lisa Jules said it's a work of genius. Harlan Coben says it's her best book yet. And if you've read Alice before, you know that's high praise. Chris Whitaker says it's unpredictable and unforgettable. And Mary Kubica says it's magnetic and jaw-dropping. So there you go. 4 great blurbs for that book. Then we've got Clever Little Thing by Helena Echlin. It's coming on January 14th. Charlotte's daughter Stella is sensitive and brilliant, perhaps even a genius, but a recent change in her behavior has alarmed her mother. Following the sudden death of Stella's babysitter, Blanca, the once disruptive and antisocial child has become docile and agreeable. What's upsetting is that she has begun to mirror Blanca's personality, from Blanca's repetitive phrases to her accent to fierce cravings for Armenian meat stew after being raised as a vegetarian. Charlotte's pregnant with her second child and depleted and sick with the pregnancy. She's convinced that Blanca herself is somehow responsible for Stella's transformation. But how could Blanca, dead, still be entwined in their lives? Has Blanca somehow possessed Stella? Has Stella become Blanca? As Charlotte becomes increasingly obsessed, she is sure that only she can save her daughter, even if it's too soon clear that her husband believes that this is all in Charlotte's head. So there you've got Clever Little Thing. And Audrey Adrain, who I love, the author of The Push, says it's sharp and unflinching, a perfectly unnerving story. Ashley saying that, consider it true. Next, we've got the JFK Conspiracy from Brad Meltzer and Josh Mensch. This is coming on January 14th. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, is often ranked among Americans' most well-liked presidents. Yet what most Americans don't know that is that JFK's historic presidency almost ended before it began at the hands of a disgruntled sociopathic loner armed with dynamite. On December 11th, 1960, shortly after Kennedy's election and before his inauguration, a retired postal worker named Jim Richard Pavlik waited in his car on a quiet street in Palm Beach, Florida. He knew the president-elect's schedule. He knew when Kennedy would leave his house. He knew where Kennedy was going. And from there, he had a simple plan. One could have changed the course of history. So it's the secret plot to kill Kennedy and why it failed. And John Meacham says history is full of fascinating twists and near twists. And Meltzer and Mensch are the main masters of the tale of such moments. So there you go. JFK conspiracy. This book I've been hearing a lot about as well. In fact, there's a library presentation going on right now where Lisa's speaking, and I'm looking forward to watching that later. It's coming out on January 14th. This is Lisa Genova, New York Times bestselling author of Still Alice. Her book is More or Less Maddie. Maddie Banks is just like any other stressed out Frenchman at NYU. Between schoolwork, exams, navigating life in the city, and a recent breakup, it's normal to be feeling overwhelmed. Doesn't help that she's always felt like the odd one out in her picture perfect Connecticut family. But Maddie's latest low is devastatingly low, and she goes on an antidepressant. She begins to feel good, dazzling, in fact, and soon spirals into a wild and terrifying mania that culminates in a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. As she struggles to find her way in this new reality, navigating the complex effects that bipolar has on her identity, her relationships, and her life dreams, Maddie will have to figure out how to manage being both too much and not enough. So there you've got this from Lisa Genova. Jodi Picoult said, quite simply, there is no one like Lisa Genova. I agree. So many of her books I've read that have given me insight into mental illness, other illnesses that have happened along the way that have just kind of destroyed families, and how people find their way through. Because of her background, she is able to tell a story like this and really connect the reader with it because there's authentic information there at the same time as great storytelling, which is truly an art. Next, from Scott Turow, we've got Presumed Guilty. We all know him as the author of Presumed Innocent, but guilty. So what have we got? Rusty's a retired judge attempting a third act in life with a loving, soon-to-be wife, Bee. But the piece that takes Rusty so long to find evaporates when Bee's young adult son, Aaron, living under their supervision while on probation for drug possession, disappears. Aaron doesn't return. Soon, he will be sent back to jail. Aaron eventually turns up with a vague story about a camping trip with his troubled girlfriend, May, that ended in a fight and a long hitchhike home. Days later, when she still hasn't returned, suspicion falls on Aaron. And when May is subsequently discovered dead, Aaron is arrested and set for trial on charges of first-degree murder. Faced with few choices and even fewer hopes, Bee begs Rusty to return to court one last time, defend her son, and to save their last best hope for happiness. So there we've got Presumed Guilty. And how many people watched Presumed Innocent? It was on Apple TV. We thought it was really well done, though there are differences between that and the book, as always. Next is another book that's getting a lot of buzz, folks. This is What Happened to McCrae's by Tracy Lang. Getting a lot of conversation about this one, too, coming on January 14th. When Kyle McCrae gets word that his father has suffered a debilitating stroke, he returns to his home of Potsdam, New York, where he doesn't expect a warm welcome. Kyle left suddenly 2.5 years ago, abandoning people who depended on him. His father, his employees, his friends, not to mention Casey, his wife of 16 years and a beloved teacher in town. He plans to lie low and help his dad recuperate until he can leave again. The longer he's home, the more Kyle understands the impact his departure has had on the people he left behind. When he's presented with an opportunity for redemption as the coach of the floundering middle school hockey team, he begins to find compassion in unexpected places. Kyle even considers staying in Potsdam, but that's only possible if he and Casey can come to some kind of peace with each other. It's really funny that this book is set in Potsdam because the neighbor across the street that moved away last year grew up in Potsdam. Like, of all places to be setting the book, I feel like I know so much about Potsdam, New York. Next, we've got Isola, which is coming from Allegra Goodman on January 21st. And a couple of the team members, Tom, Francesca, and myself, had the pleasure of hearing her talk about this book at a recent event. Heir to a fortune, Marguerite is destined for a life of prosperity and gentility. And then she's orphaned, and her guardian, an enigmatic and volatile man, spends her inheritance and insists she accompany him on an expedition to New France. Isolated and afraid, Marguerite befriends her guardian servant, and the two develop an intense attraction. But then their relationship is discovered, they're brutally punished and abandoned on a small island with no hope of rescue. Once a child of privilege who dressed in gowns and laced pearls in her hair, Marguerite finds herself at the mercy of nature. As weather turns, blanketing the island in ice, she discovers a faith she'd never needed before. And what was really interesting about this book is Allegra actually got the idea for this 20 years ago when she took her children on a trip, and there was something that happened there, and the idea has been brewing with her for that long. Where she's done some dabbling at writing of it, but hasn't written the whole book till now. Next, we've got Three Wild Dogs and the Truth by Marcus Zuzak, coming on January 21st. And you know him as the New York Times bestselling author of The Book Thief. What happens when the Zuzak family opens their home to three big, wild, street-hardened dogs? Reuben, more wolf than hound; Archer, blonde, beautiful, destructive; and the rancorously smiling Frosty, who walks like a rolling thunderstorm. The answer can only be chaos. There's street fights, park fights, public shamings, property damages, injuries, hospital visits, wellness checks, pure comedy, shocking tragedy, and carnage that must be read to be believed. And there's a reckoning of shortcomings and failure, a strengthening of will, but most important of all, an explosion of love and the joy and recognition of family. If I ever had three dogs in my house, I would go out of my mind. One would have been enough. Just saying. It's from Frida McFadden, who is definitely one of the most prolific authors of the year. We've got The Crash coming on January 28th. Tegan is 8 months pregnant and desperately wants to put her crumbling life in the rearview mirror, so she hits the road, planning to stay with her brother until she can figure out her next move. But she doesn't realize he's heading straight into a blizzard, and she never arrives at her destination. Stranded in rural Maine with a dead car and a broken ankle, Tegan worries she's made a terrible mistake. And then a miracle occurs. She's rescued by a couple who offer her a room in their warm cabin until the snow clears. But you see this coming, folks. Something isn't right. She believes she was waited out the storm, but as time ticks by, she comes to realize she's in grave danger. The safe haven isn't what she thought it was, and staying here may be her most deadly mistake yet. Quick note on Frida McFadden, that is a pseudonym. She was a doctor who retired at the end of last year from medical practice because she was writing so much, and she was writing a ton of books, and this is one of them, the beginning of January. Next, we've got Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. I'm looking forward to this. You know her as the New York Times bestselling author of Black Cake, which was also made to a show that I think ran on Hulu. I think that's right. And I've heard from the people at Ballantine that this one is just as good. It's on sale also on January 28th. When 10-year-old Ebby Freeman heard the gunshot, time stopped. And when she saw her brother Baz lying on the floor, surrounded by the shattered pieces of a centuries-old jar, life as Ebby knew it shattered as well. The crime was never solved, and because the Freemans were out of one of the only black families in a particularly well-to-do enclave of New England, the case has had an enduring voyeuristic pull for the public. The last thing the Freemans want is another media frenzy splashing their family across the papers. But when Ebby's high-profile romance falls apart without any explanation, it's exactly what they get. Ebby flees to France, only to have her past follow her there. And as she tries to process what's happened, she begins to think about the other loss her family suffered on that day 18 years ago. The stoneware jar that has been in their family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. So there you've got set up for a story and a gorgeous cover of this book by Charmaine Wilkerson. Next, we've got The Oligarch's Daughter from Joseph Finder, and a lot of you have enjoyed his writing through the years. He is the New York Times bestselling author of House on Fire, and Lee Child says about this one, as good as it gets. Paul Brightman is a man on the run, running under an assumed name in a small New England town with $1 million bounty on his head. When his security is breached, Paul is forced to flee into the New Hampshire wilderness to evade Russian operatives who can seemingly predict his every move. 6 years ago, Paul was a rising star on Wall Street who fell in love with a beautiful photographer named Tatiana, unaware that her father was a Russian oligarch and the object of considerable interest from several U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, to save his own life, Paul must unravel a decades-old conspiracy that extends to the highest reaches of government. Really interesting story. Before we left New York, which probably is almost 5 years ago now when this happened, all along 57th Street, a lot of the big buildings of the apartments and the condos that were going in were being bought by Russian oligarchs, and no one was ever there as a result. Like there's no one in the building, so it was people that were just offshoring their money over to these places. So I always found like the Russian oligarchs, here they are, what they're going to do. Oops. Now we got some February titles to look forward to. Starting out with Harlem Rhapsody, which is by Victoria Christopher Murray. Many of you were at the event that she did with us when she's the co-author of The Personal Librarian, along with Marie Boston. Gosh, why am I spacing her last name right now? I know this. Tom,
Marie
jump on.
Benedict.
Marie
Marie
Benedict.
Benedict.
I can't believe I did that, especially since Marie's got a book coming out as well. Um, just so you know, the interview that we did with them, the evening event, has been watched 25,000 times. I looked at this the other day, I couldn't believe it. And a lot of the interviews and the pieces that we've done have really high numbers of people watching. As people go back and discover the books, maybe it's in paperback, maybe to read with their book group. But I was astonished to see some of the numbers the other day because I don't look at this all that often, but it was really interesting to see. So, what's Harlem Rhapsody about? 1919 high school teacher Jessie Redmond Fawcett has been named literary editor of The Crisis, the first Black woman to hold this position in a preeminent Negro magazine. Jessie is poised to achieve literary greatness, but she holds a secret that jeopardizes it all. W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of The Crisis, is not only Jessie's boss, he's her lover, and neither his wife nor their 14-age difference can keep the two apart. Amidst rumors of their tumultuous affair, Jessie is determined to prove herself. She attacks the challenges of discovering young writers with fervor, and under her leadership, The Crisis thrives. When her first novel is released to great acclaim, it's clear that Jessie is at the heart of a renaissance in Black music, theater, and the arts. But as she strives to preserve her legacy, she'll discover the high cost of her unparalleled success. So once again, Victoria Christopher Murray, who writes with Marie Benedict on The Personal Librarian. Next, we've got The Last Twilight in Paris by Pam Jenoff. You know her as the author of The Lost Girls of Paris. It's London, it's 1953. Louise is still adjusting to her post-war role as a housewife when she discovers a necklace in a box at a secondhand shop. The box is marked with the name of a department store in Paris, and she's certain she's seen the necklace before when she worked with the Red Cross in Nazi-occupied Europe, and it holds the key to the mysterious death of her friend Franny during the war. Following the trail of clues to Paris, Louise seeks help from her former boss Ian, with whom she shares a romantic history. She races to find the connection between the necklace, the department store, and Franny's death. But nothing's as it seems, and there are forces determined to keep the truth buried forever. So we've got Last Twilight in Paris. Next, we've got Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks coming on February 4th. Many cultural and religious traditions expect those who are grieving to step away from the world. In contemporary life, we are met more often with red tape and to-do lists. And this is exactly what happened to Geraldine Brooks when her partner of more than 3 decades, Tony Horwitz, collapsed and died on a Washington, D.C. sidewalk. After spending their early years together in conflict zones as foreign correspondents, Geraldine and Tony settled down to raise 2 boys on Martha's Vineyard. But their happy life ended abruptly when on Memorial Day 2019, Geraldine received the phone call we all dread. 3 years later, she booked a flight to the remote island off the coast of Australia with the intention of finally giving herself the time to mourn. In a shack on a pristine, rugged coast, she often went days without seeing another person. There she pondered the various ways in which cultures grieve and what rituals of her own might help her to rebuild a world around the void of Tony's death. Book sounds spectacular. A galley's on its way to me, and she's the best-selling author, of course. And I remember we were trying to get her to do an interview with us at some point, and they said no, she's off writing, and this book is the product of that. So really looking forward to reading it. Next, we've got Seeking Shelter by Jeff Hobbs, a working mother, her children, and the story of homelessness in America. I've been a long, long, long time fan of Jeff's work. His first book was The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace, which was a New York Times bestseller. I was one of the first people to interview him about that book at Book Expo, as he was one of the buzz authors when it came out. And since then, I've followed the writing of what he's done because he's always looking at what's going on in our world today and how does it happen and what can we do. So here we've got in 2018, poverty and domestic violence cast Evelyn and her children to the urban wilderness of Los Angeles, where she avoids the family crisis network that offers no clear pathway for her children to remain together and in a decent school. For the next 5 years, Evelyn works full-time as a waitress, yet remains unable to afford legitimate housing or qualify for government aid. All the while, she strives to provide stability, education, loving memories, and college aspirations for her children, even while they sleep in motels and in her car, living in fear of both her ex and the nation's largest child welfare agency. Eventually, Evelyn encounters Wendy Gaines, a recently trained social worker who decades earlier survived her own abusive marriage and housing crisis. Evelyn becomes one of Wendy's first clients, and the relationship transforms them both. I heard Jeff speak about this book at a library journal event a couple of weeks ago, and he was so articulate of talking about the problem in America and the little big things that happen along the way. Say these people are said that they're going to be sleeping in a motel here, but their child has a basketball game over here, and she's working here. How do you do it all and hold it all together? I'm looking forward to reading it. And next year, I'm looking forward to doing some books like this, interviews with people like this. I've got an idea for January and this book for February to just take some nonfiction and bring us into what's happening in the world today, actually in the country today. Probably going to stick with there. Next, we've got Nemesis by Greg Hurwitz, an Orphan X novel. It's coming on February 11th. Evan Smoke, who I have a crush on, and my husband is fully aware of this, was once a highly successful black ops assassin known as Orphan X, dedicated to a rigid set of operational rules. Even after going deep underground and remaking his life, Evan remains dedicated to his unbreakable code. But for the first time in his life, those principles have put him on a collision course with the man who might be his best friend in the world, Tommy Stojak. Tommy, a gifted gunsmith who has created much of Evan's own weapons and combat gear, has apparently crossed one of Evan's sharply delineated lines. And when Evan designs to have it out with Tommy, Evan is ambushed by a skilled crew of killers determined to take him down. But now Evan is hard to kill, and the dispute explodes into open warfare between Evan and Tommy. And now Evan has no choice but to track down and face his only friend. So there's a nemesis. Next, from Marie Benedict, the aforementioned Marie Benedict, whose name I forgot, but Tom reminded me of, and I can't believe I forgot. We've got Queens of Crime. This is set in London in 1930. The five greatest women crime writers have banded together to form a secret society with a single goal to show that they are no longer willing to be treated as second-class citizens by their male counterparts in the legendary Detection Club. Led by the formidable Dorothy L. Sayers, the group includes Agatha Christie, Nagayo Marsh, Marjorie Allingham, and Baroness Emma Orsi. They call themselves the Queens of Crime. Their plan: solve an actual murder, that of a young woman found strangled in a park in France, who may have connections leading to the highest levels of British establishment. They embark on their own investigation. The queens of crime discover they're stronger together. But soon, a killer targets Dorothy Sayers herself, threatening to expose a dark secret in her past that she would do anything to keep hidden. So I love this cover. These women are joining arms to go out and be the queens of crime. Got also at the Library Journal event, we got to hear Marie talking about this book, what spurred her to write about the queens of crime, and I'm hoping to interview her because she's always got a unique take on, here she's taking on women in history that are often forgotten. A lot of these women are not forgotten at this time, but by the same token, how much the men were, more in the public eye than they were all along. Next, we've got 3 Days in June by Ann Tyler. February 11th, this one's coming out. Gail Baines is having a bad day. To start, she loses her job or quits, depending on who you ask. Tomorrow, her daughter is getting married, and she hasn't even been invited to the spa day organized by the mother of the groom. Then Gail's ex-husband Max arrives unannounced on her doorstep, carrying a cat, without a place to stay and without even a suit. But the true crisis lands when Debbie shares with her parents a secret that she's just learned about her husband to be. Not only throw the wedding into question, but also stir up Gail and Max's past. So she is the prize-winning author of A Spool of Blue Thread. Next, we've got Waiting for the Long Night Moon by Amanda Peters. Many of you know Amanda Peters as she was recently a guest in one of our Bookaccino Live book group events where she talked to us about the berry pickers. And we talked about the story collection coming that night just a little bit. So it's coming on February 11th. It's a debut collection of short fiction. Amanda Peters melds traditional storytelling with beautiful spare prose, describe the dignity of the traditional way of life, the humiliations of systemic racism, and the resilient power to endure. A young man returns from residential school only to realize he can no longer communicate with his own parents. A grieving mother finds purpose and healing on the front lines as a water protector. A nervous child dances in her first, I'm going to say her first tribal dance. I'm going to leave it there. The collection also includes the Indigenous Voices Award-winning and title story, Waiting for the Long Night Moon. Times sad, sometimes disturbing, but always redemptive. These stories will remind you that where there is grief, there's also joy. Where there's trauma, there's also resilience. And most importantly, there is power. So there's Waiting for the Long Night Moon. From Jojo Moyes, yes, the author of The Giver of Stars, we've got We All Live Here. Love the cover. Coming February 11th, Lila Kennedy has a lot on her plate: a broken marriage, two wayward daughters, a house that's falling apart, an elderly stepfather who seems to have quietly moved in. Her career is in free fall and her love life is complicated. So when Lila's real dad, a man she has barely seen since he ran off to Hollywood 35 years ago, suddenly reappears on her doorstep, it feels like the final straw. But it turns out even the family you thought you could never forgive might have something to teach you about love and what it actually means to be a family. So there you go. We all live here. It's also making me laugh because I think what Tom, for February or January and February, I think we should have done the broken marriage because I think it's been in more of these book descriptions than I want to think about. Next, we've got We Would Never by Tova Mirvis. And Tom and I got the opportunity to meet her at a luncheon, I guess a month or so ago. No one appeared more surprised than Haley Gelman when she comes under suspicion for the murder of her soon-to-be ex-husband, Jonah. Haley, nicknamed Sunshine by her mother for her bright outlook and ever-present smile, has always tried to do what is expected of her and is regarded as a family peacemaker. But is anyone, including Haley, who she always seemed to be? The months leading up to Jonah's death have been fraught, including a bitter separation and a messy custody battle over their young daughter, Maya. When Haley files a motion to relocate to Florida so she can be her family, Jonah retaliates, and the divorce begins to spiral dangerously out of control. When talking to Tova at lunch, she said this story is based on something that she'd actually read in the paper and she followed for a really long time. And while this is a fictionalization, it's exactly what she thinks, could have happened with a situation like this. So there's We Would Never. Then we've got Close Your Eyes and Count to 10 by Lisa Unger. And boy, does that sound scary with her. It's coming on February 25th. Charismatic daredevil and extreme adventurer Maverick Dillon invites you to the ultimate game of hide and seek. But the players gather on Falco, an island, the Falco Island. The event quickly spirals into a chilling test of survival. A storm rages as deadly threat stalks the contestants, turning the challenge into something far more sinister than the social media stunt it was intended to be. Enter Adele, a single mother with a fiery determination to protect her children at all costs. When she begins the game, she unwittingly enters a twisted web of deception and intrigue. Can she maneuver through the treacherous storm and the relentless competition and get home to her family? In a ruthless battle for survival where the stakes are higher than ever, the blurry line between the virtual and the real proves that the only person we can trust is ourselves. So there, close your eyes and count to 10. Next, we've got Show Don't Tell by Curtis Sittenfeld. In her second story collection, Curtis Sittenfeld shows why she's as beloved for her short fiction as she is for her novels. In these dazzling stories, she conjures up characters so real they seem like old friends, lay bare the moments when their long-held beliefs are overturned. In Patron Saints of Middle Age, of that title, a woman visits two friends that she hasn't seen since her divorce. In A for Alone, a married artist embarks on a creative project intended to disprove the so-called Mike Pence rule, which suggests that women and men can't spend time alone together without lusting after each other. And in Lost but Not Forgotten, Sittenfeld gives readers of her novel Prep a window into the world of her beloved characters, Lee Flora, decades later, when Lee attends an alumni reunion at her boarding school. Book sounds like complete fun, and it's by, if you don't remember, the author of romantic comedy and also Prep. These are some notable November paperback releases. We've got Steve Berry, The Atlas Maneuver, Frozen River by Ariel Lawhorn. This book, she is going to have a special announcement about that next in the presentation, so just hold on. Claren Mackintosh, A Game of Lies, Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, Silence in Her Eyes by Armando Lucas Correa, Baumgartner by Paul Auster, Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano, Jude Devereaux's My Heart Will Find You, and Never Give Up, A Prairie Family Story by Tom Brokaw. And these are my 36 to date bets on selections, and I have a few more coming, and we shall see how many I get to. We're going to have a few more over the next couple of weeks, so we shall see where we end up. Also, recently, we added an interview with Paul Hawkins talking about the Blue Hour, and an author with Susan Reiger talking about Like Mother, Like Mother. I enjoyed speaking to both of them. What was interesting is I learned a lot about their work. Like as I was talking to them, I had seen things in the book, but I'd missed things as well. And that really makes it so much fun to talk to these authors because remember, we're only seeing our vision of a book when we finish it. And now we're seeing their vision of why they wrote the book and why they wrote certain things. I'm still laughing about the fact I have the hair elastics on my Anne and the Susan Reiger picture. Also, we've got a feature running now on the site called What to Give, What to Get. We know you are craving ideas for gift giving and getting at the holidays, so we're offering our Get What to Give, What to Get promotion with some perfect suggestions. Paul Hawkins, The Blue Hour. Everyone This Christmas Says a Secret by Benjamin Stevenson. The Night Before Christmas at Dunder Mifflin. 3 books that we think are great for holiday giving and getting as well. I'm up for the give me, to me, from me suggestions. I love those. Okay, I promise you this. Ariel Lawhorn will be joining us to discuss The Frozen River, a national bestseller, a GMA Book Club pick, and an NPR Book of the Year on Tuesday, December 3rd at 8 p.m. Yes, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. We're hoping that many of you join us. So many of you told us that you love this book. So many people entered the contest to win a copy for their 12 copies for their group on reading group guides. So I know that we want to see a big group of you turning out for this event. I'm very, very happy we're going to be able to have her join us. And on Wednesday, December 11th at 8 o'clock, we're going to have an event that we just do once a year. It's join us for a special Bookaccino Live evening event where book reporter reviewers talk about their favorite books of 2024. This is always fun. And sign up is available on tbrnetwork.com/events. All our events are going to be listed out there, so you can always find them and sign up there if you don't go to Book Reporter or see the newsletters that come out from us. And here's to some new reading for the following year. I cannot believe it's going to be 2025 when our next Bookaccino live book preview event happens. We will be previewing books that are releasing from January 7th through February 4th. You'll see some that were there today, but there are many more. And we're going to do a peek ahead at March. Yes, we're marching right into the year. It's going to be on Wednesday, January 8th at 2 p.m. Gives you a week to recover from New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Get yourself back in the office, back to work. Sign up's going to be available on Book Reporter, Reading Group Guides. And yes, we will send out an events newsletter that has this in it. So for those of you who are not going to see for the rest of the year, wish you a happy Thanksgiving, a Merry Christmas, a happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts on the same day as Christmas this year, and a happy New Year. And we want to thank you all for being a very, very special part of Book Reporter by joining us for these events every month. We love bringing them, and we love seeing how many of you are part of our audience as well. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.